A very interesting pro-revenge Reddit story from Quiet Fangirl. Mom takes down the HOA from the inside. My neighborhood does not have a homeowners association, at least not anymore. When my parents first moved in, my older sibling, maybe 2 years old and with me as a little glowworm, there was an HOA. They took money from the neighborhood in exchange for their services. At first, and for quite a while, my parents just kind of shrugged it off. The HOA shoveled the snow off the streets in winter and dealt with trash collection, so they were doing something worthwhile, right? Ha! No. The city controlled the snowplows and garbage trucks, not the HOA. But still, there was the illusion of effort. And besides, one summer, they decided to contact a company to plant new trees all over the neighborhood. The fact that the company was owned by the son of the head of the HOA was totally coincidental. The trees were the beginning of the end for the HOA. Why? Well, my grandma on my dad's side was visiting when they came around to plant the trees. My grandma, who is a certified master gardener. And so she stared through the windows of our house as the guys planting the trees just dropped the saplings on the grass. Still with their roots inside the bag, they came in. No holes dug, no holes cut, just a bagged sapling lying on the grass like a pathetic and sad stick. The saplings laid there all night. No one came back to actually do their job and plant them. My master gardener grandma mentioned offhand that those saplings were going to die unless they got in the soil. And something clicked in my mom's head. She was paying the HOA money, actual money, every month, while both she and my dad worked, taking care of 2 very little kids, sending us to daycare and preschool and arranging babysitters and feeding us. And the Homeowners Association was just going to pull this half-assed bullshit instead of do what she's paying them for? No fucking way. So she showed up to the head of the HOA's house and basically demanded that the trees get planted properly, like she's apparently paying for them to. The head of the HOA, so excited for someone actually caring about the neighborhood, made their second mistake. They asked if Mom wanted to join the HOA. She agreed. The trees were planted, but most didn't make it. My grandma was right. First things first, my mum showed up to the next HOA meeting. There were like 5 people there. No wonder they asked Mom to join. They desperately needed the people. So Mom looked at this collection of white people, herself included, who weren't even paying money to the HOA, like the rest of the neighborhood. All the contractors the HOA called in were close relatives of other HOA members and weren't paid by the HOA. After all, they're family. So my mom started digging. She spent pretty much a full summer taking down the HOA before she had to go back to teaching in the fall. With me carted along after her and my sibling old enough to be in school or daycare, she dug through the years of paperwork detailing the HOA's financial situation. And she found something extremely enlightening. The HOA didn't actually do anything. Well, they didn't do anything to benefit the community. Everything they claimed to do was either covered by the individual homeowner or by the city itself. So they were collecting money from all the neighborhood residents under false pretenses, and actually they weren't even supposed to be in our neighborhood. Their association's zone was a whole different neighborhood. So what is a working mother of 2 small children to do while her husband is off at work and she's off for the summer? She goes door to door with pamphlets. Me and my sibling in a stroller as she weaves her way through the neighborhood blocks. Pamphlets explaining the situation and how to stop paying for services you'll never get. Pamphlets that are, of course, written in both English and Spanish to account for the high amount of Latino and Hispanic people in our neighborhood. And naturally, she got a lawyer and an accountant. It put a major dent in her pocket, but if it meant the entire neighborhood wasn't exploited for money each month, it was worth every penny. Another HOA member helped her sift through the documents and data and pass out pamphlets and encourage people to show up to the meetings, but had to back out because of work-related reasons. My mom rolled up to the courthouse, flanked by the lawyer and accountant, her kids safe at home with her husband, and had more than enough evidence to get the Homeowners Association the fuck out of her neighborhood, expose the fraudsters for the frauds they were, and make sure that no HOA would ever push their luck in our neighborhood. It's been almost 19 years, and no one's even tried making another homeowners association in our neighborhood. TL, DR. When dealing with a worse than useless homeowners association, get deep in the financials and lawyer the fuck up. Wow. What a revenge against the fraudulent HOA that was charging the neighborhood for services it didn't provide. The best part is that OP joined the HOA and then went door to door to inform her neighbors about what was going wrong with them. The final blow came when OP got the HOA permanently dismantled. It was not just revenge, but also a social service. The best example of volunteering. The next story is from SC2 Superjack. Mock the disabled? Justice is served many years later. This is a story about a piece of shit receiving their deserved karma several years later. Many years ago, I worked in the lovely career of retail. It's sadly normal for there to be a constant flow of shop scum that make you despise their existence, and there are those that are so horrific that what they do is burned into your mind forever. Fortunately, one of these unforgettable moments allowed me to extract my revenge. I had only worked in retail for 1 year in this newly built store and was starting to settle in. Getting to know the great customers and understanding that some people shouldn't be allowed outside, which being a shy person who hates conflict wasn't the best. But at least one of my customers was an absolutely adorable elderly lady who always made time to talk and was an absolute joy to be with. It had been some weeks since I had last seen her, but one morning I see her car park into the disabled parking bay, as she already has a blue badge. Only this time she hobbled out of the car on crutches with a pot on her leg. I didn't have a chance to talk to her yet when a works truck, which did not have a blue disabled badge, pulled into the disabled space next to her and out jumped an early 40s builder with their teenage kid. Well, this little old lady was having none of this and must have absolutely massive balls of steel and stood up to this ignorant builder and politely informed them that they shouldn't be parking there as it's for the disabled and he doesn't have a badge. What happened next? I can't forget. This builder decided the best course of action was to humiliate and insult this poor elderly lady in crutches, accuse her of faking her disability and claim the cast on her leg was a fake and that she probably milks the benefit system for as much money as possible. Then walks off putting on an overdramatic fake limp, laughing away with their teenage kid whilst the old lady stood there in shock. Sadly, being one who lacks courage, I did absolutely nothing about it, and that would stick with me forever. I tried feebly to ask a manager later to do something about it, but they didn't care or want to get involved. For years, I worked in this store, always seeing this scum builder come in and out. Fortunately, I never interacted with this scum builder, but I saw them often, and every time I did, I would always remember what they had done vividly. I would still see them park in the disabled bays and even got to the point where I would recognize them by the large blue Mercedes they drove. 7 years later, I was still working in this store, and this scum was still parking in disabled and looking like an absolute cunt. Yet this year, I was blessed with good fortune, and our store was outfitted with some absolute joyful equipment. Due to the high number of complaints, our store had set up a company to deal with the parking violations. But instead of having external parties coming in and ticketing cars, the staff of the store were given the ticketing machine, and it was our duty to go to the car park and record any cars that violated the parking rules. This was all done digitally, and there would be no paper tickets upon the cars. This was brilliant. As soon as I found out, I knew what I was going to do. It didn't take long for me to learn how to use the machine, and it certainly didn't take long for the opportunity to get revenge. And so it began. There were 3 rules for parking, and if you break these rules, there is a lovely $80 fine in return each time it happened. The first rule, no parking in disabled without a badge. And I know well that the scum builder is certainly violating this rule, and it wasn't long until I saw him next, and as soon as he entered the store, I quickly scurried out with the ticketing machine, and lo and behold, there was the oversized blue Mercedes in the closest disabled bay, with no badge. I smashed them car details in with some well-shot photos and sent the report off so that they would receive a lovely letter of their fine they would ask to pay. That's not enough though, but fortunately it takes weeks for them to finally receive the ticket, which grants me the opportunity to constantly ticket their parking violations. Because as you would expect, the scum would always park in disabled. And as I worked at the front of the store, I would always know when they had parked. After ticketing their car dozens of times, the scum unfortunately learnt their lesson as their oversized blue Mercedes no longer appeared in disabled parking bays. But as you expect, the scum would still be scum, and they would find their new parking space inside child parking. Rule 2. Don't park inside child parking without a child. Had this scum gotten enough, I thought? Of course, not they haven't learnt their lesson and continue to be a complete wanker and park in the child parking which we didn't have many spaces for. At this point, I knew all their car details by heart and would gleefully fill out the ticket machine as I skipped over to their car violating the child parking and take the photos needed for them, including shots of their cat seats that bear no child seats in them. And as it became routine, this once again carried on a few weeks more of tickets being created, and eventually they start receiving the fines. Fortunately, me being me, I am completely invisible to others and often looked over, and I have yet to be seen or caught. But as all good things must eventually come to an end, when the scum came into the shop, their blue turd automobile was no longer there in child parking or disabled. Has the scum finally learnt their lesson? Would you be surprised if they had not? As it didn't take me long to find them. Rule 3. You must park inside a marked bay. And what a surprise the scum still manages to fuck this up. They would park over the line, taking 2 spaces up. Well, guess what? That's a job for me and my ticket machine. Trying to park inside taxi parking but can't fit the big-ass car in it? Boom, that aren't inside a marked bay and catching another ticket and fine for the have one single wheel slightly over the white line of a bay? Well, guess who technically broke the rule? That's right, scumbag did. And there goes a few more weeks of fun, until eventually, Scumbag runs out of ways that they can possibly break the rules, and our company hires externally to start ticketing cars, so my beloved weapon of justice goes to rest. Now I know what people are probably going to say, that all these fines are not enforceable because of blah blah blah, but I honestly don't care for a few reasons. Firstly, I'm being paid to do this, so either way, my time or money isn't wasted. Secondly, it did have an effect as they repeatable changed their parking habits. And thirdly, even if they don't end up paying, they are still going to spend a fuck ton of the time and effort trying to overturn them over and over again, having to constantly be harassed by mail. Overall, if all the fines are counted separate and added up, they would have received thousands of pounds worth of fines, building up over time for being scum. Cherry on the top. About 3 years later, I walk by this piece of scum on the car park and watch as they scream at some innocent dude in a high-vis jacket, accusing them for being the one giving them all parking fines. Which put me at peace, knowing this must have seriously got to them and cost them to still be raving mad after 3 years. Short version, I give someone many small parking fines adding up to the thousands of sektons for insulting a disabled lady several years earlier. The revenge came late, but it was kind of perfect. This is what a random retail worker could do for a disabled lady. Initially, OP didn't have any means to inflict revenge on the builder, but when the store introduced the parking violation system, OP didn't miss any chance of finding the builder. Kudos to OP. The next story is from Orc Lemon. Don't mess with an engineer. I worked for a company that provides specialized equipment used in manufacturing. To protect my anonymity, I'll have to be vague about what exactly this machine does. During my time working in this field, I got to know many clients who would need these machines installed and serviced. One of these customers we'll call Jake. I later left the company too for a different job, but Jake apparently kept my number. One afternoon, I got a call from Jake that they wanted a new unit installing and another unit needed maintenance and wanted to know if I was available. I let him know that I left the company, but that I could pass him on to someone who could help. He tells me he'll pay 2x my current rate to install the unit over the weekend. He lets me know that the company has increased the rates for installation and the company just can't afford it. The instructions they sent over just aren't clear enough, and their engineers are scratching their heads trying to figure it out. He begs me to consider it, and I agree. For more context, installing this unit can take a good few hours, or up to a day, on your own. The company gives you two options. You can either pay for an engineer to come and install it, or you can save money and they will send instructions so the customer's own engineers can install it. The instructions aren't easy to follow, and it's company policy that if someone has started to install the equipment, the supplier wouldn't get involved since they couldn't verify that any of the pieces were broken. This will be important later. I drive down on the weekend and they show me the boxes of equipment. I set to work and I make good progress installing the unit. Around 6 hours in, and I'm stopped by Jake, who greets me. I let him know I'm nearly finished, and he tells me, "Sorry, but they just don't have the budget to pay you." He understands my frustration, but his engineers can take it from here. To say I was frustrated was an understatement. I wanted revenge. There's a small button inside the unit that changes the unit into test mode. This is done to perform, maintain on the unit, but it's impossible to configure the unit with this button pressed. It's only possible to reach this button using a pin, so it's not easily pressed during installation. Because of this, the installation instructions don't mention it. There's no real way of telling the equipment is in test mode. It just won't work normally. I think you can guess where this is going. I click the button, collect my things, and leave. Monday morning, I get a call from Jake. I declined. I knew my old company wouldn't get involved since I already started installing the unit. I knew his engineers would never figure it out. I just had to let him stew. A few days later, with many missed calls, I finally pick up. Jake is furious. He asks me where the hell I've been and why I haven't been picking up the phone. He tells me they can't figure it out how to configure the machine, and they need my help. I tell him, "Why is this my problem? You won't pay me." He told me he was sorry and they would work something out if I could get there as soon as possible. I told him, "Oh no, you're going to pay me $7,000 up front before I do anything." I'd never felt this powerful before. He screamed at me for a bit and hung up. He called back a day later after saying he's sorry for how he acted and said that if I could come fix it, he would pay me in a totally defeated tone. He tried to fight it, saying he'll pay when I was done, but I was having none of it. After a bit of back and forth, he agrees to pay me. The money hit my account, and I came in the next day. The look of confusion over his face when I took out a pin and changed the unit from test mode was priceless. It was even more priceless seeing his reaction to me, packing up my tools, and leaving after only 20 minutes of configuring. Easiest $7,000 I'd ever made. Don't try to mess with a professional problem solver. Really an epic revenge. Always pay engineers on time. And best lesson to learn from this story is that never bargain with any technical person until he or she has not completed the work. BTW, the best method to avoid confrontation is to decide service charges before starting work.